Let's look at this simple scene that I've set up. A lot of you will be familiar with my cow, Moody. And in the scene I also have a ground plane and a mirrored surface, a mirror-like surface. If I de-render everything, you'll see it's just an oddball shape with Moody and a ground plane. So if I go back into rendered mode, you can see it looks fairly good. It's fairly well lit, fairly evenly lit. But this is what I want to talk about today is environment lighting, and specifically something called image-based lighting, or sometimes called HDRI lighting. I've got an extra shader set up here. It's actually a shader group, and we will be making this group ourselves. Now if I plug the shader group in instead of the normal world environment background, we can start to see a difference. We've got a source of light, we've got shadows, we've got controllability here. For instance, I can rotate this environment around so the light moves around. So if I move that around to about 137, 140 degrees, and you'll see this becomes more evenly lit as the light source is more direct onto the side of her. You can also see from the shadows that it's moving, whereas in the background or the world environment we have very little in the way of shadows. We have no control over the direction of light. So let me just plug this back in again. Helps if I grab the socket and not the node. I can also control the intensity of the sunlight. You can see the sunlight in the mirror object here, and if I was to increase the intensity of that, you'll see this grow to a point where it will swamp out everything. Okay, but it hasn't affected the rest of the environment texture. So if I bring this back to I think it's about 1.7. Because Blender's still rendering its samples, my computer gets a little bit laggy. 1.7. Okay, yeah, that's kind of back to where it was. And we can still, let me just check I'm on GPU. I am, yeah. We can still also increase the ambient light, the rest of the environment, without affecting the sun. And I've got this down here as sky. So for example, if I was to bump it up to about 3, you'll notice that the ambient light is getting brighter without the sun growing any. I'll bump it up a bit more so you can watch here again and see that effect. So let's bump it up to about 5, and once again you see this getting brighter. Okay, apparently I'm using too much memory. Right, and my screen's gone black. Okay, should be back. So let's put this down to, can't remember, was it 1.3 or something? Somewhere about there. That's looking good. So we can control the direction of light, we can control the strength of the source, the sunlight, and the strength of the ambient light with this shader group. I think first of all we need to talk about what a HDR texture is, or an IBL texture. So let me change this to a UV image editor, and let me open up the texture I've got. Okay, this is the actual texture. Now this is in a special format. It's not a JPEG or a PNG or something like that, because quite simply JPEGs and PNGs only have a limited tone range. An EXR or HDI this shows as JPEG. Let me change this over to the EXR. There we go. An EXR, they look identical, but an EXR has a lot of extra information about the luminosity of the image. And one thing with this image is this image, I believe, is 2048 by 1024, which gives us how many pixels? Let's find out. Let's take 204. Cancel. 2048 star 1024 is 2 million pixels. Now what happens here is every single pixel on here becomes a lamp, a light source in your scene. So instead of having one lamp or 3 or 4 lamps or 5 lamps, we've now got 2 million lamps in our scene. And this is all contributing to light the whole scene a lot more naturally. Okay, we're going to talk more about HDRs and DXRs a bit later. And we're also in the next scene just going to start to build up our shader. Let me go full screen with this so you get a better idea of what's involved in the shader. Okay, I've broken this down into kind of more understandable sections, but we'll come to that in the next segment.